Welcome, gun runner.
Hi everybody, Kieran here, aka The Laird. I'm back again with another review. This time it's going to be something a little bit different. It's because it's not going to be a computer or a console or a handheld or any piece of hardware actually. This week I'm going to be reviewing a book. And that book is Atari Inc. Business is Fun by Curt, Vendel and Marty Goldberg. Now many of you know that I'm a massive Atari fan, always have been. And really that goes back to my childhood, just to give you sort of a little bit of background into why that is. And like many people, you know, it all starts off when we're kids. And my first Atari console, like many other people, was an Atari 2600, but it wasn't the wood grain model. It was actually the Junior, the sort of smaller rebranded one. And I got one of those for Christmas, and it would have been in about, I'm trying to think, I think it was 1989, so I was quite late coming into it. I already had a Sinclair Spectrum at home, but like a lot of other people at the time, I was getting a bit fed up of loading games from tape all the time and waiting half an hour for it to load, and all my friends, well not all my friends, but quite a few of my friends were starting to get into consoles and the 16-bit computers where you had disk loading or cartridge loading. It was a lot quicker. And so, you know, I became a bit jealous of that and I sort of wanted in on it. But we were quite, money was quite tight at the time, it was a recession. And my dad had lost his job, and so, you know, there wasn't a lot of money to spend. So we actually bought the 2600 Junior because obviously it was very cheap at the time. I think my dad picked it up from Toys R Us for what would have been about 40 quid or something back then, and with a few games, and it seemed like a good fit because we had the cartridge loading, it already had a massive library of games, and it had a massive selection of arcade classics. I mean, we used to go on holiday quite a lot to Butlins when I was younger, and so I grew up in those arcades at holiday camps, playing games like, you know, Cuba, Dig Dug, Pole Position, Asteroids, Space Invaders, Pac-Man, list goes on. And also, you know, where I lived, we used to have a big common, and we'd have the fun fair would come fairly often as well to the common, and they always had really good arcades there. So arcades had very much been something I'd grown up with. They were around, you know, they were around everywhere. I can remember, you know, shops and cafes and stuff like that having arcade machines as well. And the 2600 had lots of these classic arcade games, and it had the instant loading, so it was a great fit. But that wasn't really, I suppose, the machine that made me totally fall in love with the Atari brand as a company. The 2600 was just another machine I owned, you know. It was actually the Lynx, which I went into more in my Lynx review that I did, but you know, the Lynx holds a really special place in my heart. It was a machine that just made me fall in love with Atari. I mean, I suppose you could argue it was a different Atari because obviously the 2600 was their first, you know, standalone console with, you know, interchangeable games. There was the Pong and stuff like that first, but the 2600 was the machine that really launched Atari. And obviously then they were taken over by Warner Brothers, and they were taken over by, and then the consumer part of the company, you know, when the company was split into two, was taken over by the Tramiels, and it was the Tramiel Atari that released the Lynx and the Jaguar and the ST. And you know, I also owned an ST when I was younger as well. That came a little bit later than the Lynx. I actually picked one up second hand because I had a lot of friends with an ST, and it was a great purchase as well because the ST, it was compatible with PC discs, so I actually did all my college work on my ST at home, took the discs into college and transferred it all onto the PC at college, which was excellent. But I mean, I had a lot of fun with the ST as well, great memories of that. I've still got my original ST, I've still got my original Lynx, I've still got my original Atari 2600, all here, and my Jaguar for that, you know, for that matter. So, you know, Atari's something that stayed with me, and even in later years, I picked up the 7800, which I never had as a kid, although I did actually know a couple of people who had a 7800, and I did always want one, so it was nice to finally pick one up and all these years later and play all those games that I missed out on. And so when I heard that this Atari book was coming out, as you can imagine, I was massively excited by it, especially considering the authors. I mean, for those who don't know, Curt Vendel is very well known in Atari circles. He runs the Atari Museum. You can look it up on the internet to see everything he's got. He's got so much stuff that that was rescued from Atari over the years. Just about everything you can think of, really. It's well worth going and have a look at his site. And he was also an engineer. And for those of you might be familiar with the Atari flashback consoles, where the plug and play 2600s, where they've got the built-in games and stuff like that. Curt Vendel was behind the later versions of that, where he designed the chip and everything. Where it's basically an Atari 2600 on a chip. So he was a designer of that, and his co-author Marty Goldberg is probably one of my favourite writers. I mean, many of you know that I write for Retro Gamer magazine from time to time in the UK, and he was someone I aspired to definitely before I started writing for them. I used to read Marty's work, and I always just thoroughly enjoyed it. And when I had the chance to sort of in a way work alongside him, write articles for the same magazine as him and stuff, it made me feel quite special in a way. He's someone I spoke to on a number of occasions, and his Atari knowledge is second to none. There is nobody out there, I don't think, who knows more about Atari and early video games in general actually than Marty Goldberg. He's a fantastic writer, fantastic source of knowledge. So with those two behind it, and the contacts and everything that they have, I just knew it was going to be something special. And it really, to be honest, just doesn't disappoint. They spoke to just about everybody involved in Atari over that sort of first period of the company. I mean, this is the first book. I believe there's going to be 3. And this book goes up to around 1984, when the company was split into 2, when it was split into Atari Games and Atari Corporation. And Jack Tramiel and his sons took over the consumer division, which would become Atari Corporation. And so it covers right from the beginning, when the company was started by Ted Dabney and Nolan Bushnell. Goes through the Warner takeover, and the company becoming massive, and then from boom to bust when the North American video game crash happened, and everything they had to do to stay afloat, etc., etc. It goes into just amazing amounts of detail, stories from people who were actually there at the time. I mean, this book is big. I mean, I've had this a long time now, and I've been reading it on and off because I don't get a chance to read much, I have to say, probably not as much as I'd like to. But I've actually just been away for 3 weeks with work, and with all the travelling and stuff, it's given me an amazing opportunity to actually just catch up on it. And I've finished it now, and I wish I'd finished it sooner in a way, because it just blew me away. I mean, just to show you the spine of this book. I mean, that's how big this book is. I mean, it is like a phone directory or something, but that's what you want, because it doesn't miss anything. I mean, the great thing about this is as well, that I'll just sort of show you briefly, is that all the way through the book, you've got pictures as well, and these are pictures that probably many of them have never been seen before. Dug out of the archives. There's schematics, there's photos from the offices, there's early designs, there are arcade flyers, there is, I mean, you name it, it's probably in here. I mean, it's just unbelievable, the amount of stuff that there is in here. It's I don't want to sort of say it lightly, but it did absolutely blow me away by the content. I couldn't say anything that they skipped, because there just isn't anything. It's just so comprehensive. I mean, even if you aren't a fan of Atari as a brand, if you aren't, you know, a self-confessed Atari fanboy or an Atarian, as we prefer to be called, I think you'd still enjoy this book. If you're a fan of video games in general, then you should be a fan of the Atari brand anyway, because you know they were the most important company, you know, I think, in what we now call the video game industry. You know, they were the ones who kicked it all off. The Atari 2600 was the console that started it all. I mean, people nowadays playing their Xboxes and stuff like that, you know, oh, that's that old thing. But you know, that was the console that started the whole industry. It was the first mainstream video game machine, and the one that everybody wanted. You know, for a long time it dominated the market. Nothing came close to it. It's, you know, we've got so used to having multiple machines on the market, but you know, there's no underestimating, you know, how big Atari were. I mean, less so for Europeans and in the UK, but obviously in America, you know, a lot of Americans remember how big the Nintendo brand was, and you hear them talk about how we didn't say games, we said Nintendo. Well, before Nintendo, it was like that with Atari. People didn't say games, they said Atari. I mean, I can actually remember being as a young kid, and I had an uncle, and he always used to just say any kind of games or consoles, computers, he used to call it an Atari. And I think that just shows how big the brand was to a certain generation. You know, that you can't underestimate the impact of Atari and on the business in any way. And this book just covers every little part of that. I mean, if I was going to give it a rating, it's a solid 10 out of 10. You can't be anything less than that, because there really is nothing really to fault with this book. I mean, there's odd little things. I'll mention them briefly. I mean, there's the odd spelling mistake. Who cares? There's the there's the odd little funny bit of printing. I mean, the funny thing, my book, you would have seen this in the video, but the print's off on the second half of the book. You can probably see that down the side, but you know, who cares at the end of the day? Because it was a Kickstarter to even get this going. You know, they started a Kickstarter campaign and everything to get this book into production, and it feels like even little things like that doesn't bother me, because it feels like a homebrew product. It's not, you know, this mass market done by somebody filled with sound bites and you know, shameless promotion and advertising and things like that. This is a book written by fans of the brand. Curt and Marty aren't just writers, aren't just engineers, they are Atarians at heart. They wrote this book because they love Atari like many of the rest of us. And that really comes through when you're reading it, because, not in a fanboyish way, in a passionate way, and the fact that they're telling a story and it's told really well. And all the contributions from the other people, you can feel all the way through reading the book how much the people who worked for Atari loved Atari. You hear a lot of people who, you know, come out of companies and they're really negative and say, oh, I hated them and this was horrible and this was awful. But all you hear in this book was, this is why Atari was so great. This is why I loved working there. I mean, the second book is going to cover the next chapter of Atari, which will be the Tramiel era. And I think we know that's going to be quite a bit different, because the style of the management and stuff of Jack was so different. And we hear lots of stories about how Jack was to work for, without going into, you know, too much detail. He was supposed to have been a pretty tough guy. You know, he was you either loved him or you hated him. You know, where this goes through, you know, obviously the early days with Marty and Ted and how they just did things completely differently. You know, getting stoned while playing arcade machines and drinking, and the relaxed atmosphere and the whole new way that the company was managed, and there was nothing like that anywhere else. I mean, they were just, you know, even getting away from the video games industry, it's really interesting insight into business and how Atari did business and how it was completely different to the way everyone else did business, and yet they were still hugely successful. And it's just fascinating from start to finish. So, you know, I just want to say, really, I mean, well done to Curt and Marty for producing, you know, one of the best books I've ever read, if not the best. And thank you to all the people who contributed to it. You know, I'd be too many to mention. You're all listed in the book. And just a quick mention as well, special mention, there's a really good to see as well that there's several forwards in the book, and one of those forwards is actually by Ted Dabney, one of the co-founders of Atari. Another one is by Ralph Baer, who many will know is really the grandfather of video games. You know, he's kind of considered the guy who created them in a way, because the first console, the Magnavox Odyssey, was Ralph Baer's creation. So to have a great man like that as well doing the forward was also brilliant. You know, shows that even people who didn't work for Atari, how much the brand meant to them as well. So yes, if you don't already have this book, just to recap, go and get it. You can get it from Amazon. So there's, you know, it's not hard to find. So Atari Business is fun. Go and get it. Lock yourself in a room to read it, and I'm sure that you'll love it every bit as much as I did. I mean, the book really is fantastic. So that's all for today. I've got some more reviews coming up, some more regular ones of I've got a couple more handhelds I want to review. One is very, very special, but I don't want to give away too much at the moment. But it's going to be something that you haven't probably seen before. And also I might do something a little bit more regular at some point as well, like the Game Boy or something like that. But we'll see. If there's anything you want to see, let me know, and I'll endeavour to do my best to meet your requirements. I do aim to please. And that's about it really. So you can catch up with me on Twitter at RetroLaird. I'm on Facebook via various groups. I mean, recommended while I'm here, Curt and Marty's got their own group on Facebook, the Atari Museum group. So hit them up in that group, let them know how great the book is. And I hope you enjoyed the review today, and I'll catch you all soon. Bye bye.